I'm James Chater at Taiwan's main international airport on the day all quarantine requirements on travellers coming into the country have been lifted. I'll be speaking to arrivals and finding out what they have planned for their first day in Taiwan.
The average age of first home buyers is going up as inflation and high prices continue to bite. A snub to Elon Musk. Taiwan's defense chief says the military won't be buying any more Teslas. And keep Taiwan safe if you want to keep chip supply chains secure. That's the message from the economy minister on the visit to the U.S. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Ethan Liu. From Thursday, travelers arriving in Taiwan no longer have to quarantine. The lifting of border restrictions comes 2.5 years after Taiwan first implemented isolation measures in response to the coronavirus outbreak. Our reporter James Chater went to Taiwan's main international airport and met some of the people who had just landed.
Travelling to Taiwan just got a lot simpler. These international passengers are the first to arrive here who won't have to quarantine straight out of the airport. After more than 2 years, the government has scrapped isolation rules to combat the coronavirus. Some travellers planned their trips especially to coincide with the lifting of restrictions.
目前就感觉很像疫情之前，就是回来没有任何繁琐程序的这样的一个感觉，对。
没有隔离哦，很好，非常好。 对啊，很开心。出来的很快，蛮快的。对啊，对，所以我很开心。
In early 2020, Taiwan was one of the first countries to implement entry restrictions as the pandemic paralyzed global travel. Taiwan's quick response won international praise. But the country has since lagged behind others in returning to normal. The removal of mandatory quarantine is aimed at boosting Taiwan's economy. But arrivals into the country will still be capped at 150,000 a week, and passengers must take a rapid test the day after they arrive.
It just adds a couple of extra productive days to the journey instead of having to come here and wait 4 days before you can actually start doing anything. I can get tomorrow in the office and then I've got the whole weekend to go sightseeing and be a tourist as well as working here as well.
Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen visited the airport to thank officials for their work during the period of restrictions and to mark the reopening of Taiwan's borders.
那我要利用这个机会告诉我们国际上的好朋友，台湾准备好了，欢迎光临，邀请大家来台湾。
It's been 2.5 years since you could walk out of an airport here and head straight back into life in Taiwan. And while there is some nervousness about the border reopening, there's also excitement that the time has come for Taiwan to reconnect with the world. James Chater and Damon Lin at Taoyuan International Airport for TaiwanPlus.
Thursday's border opening ends 2.5 years of strict quarantine rules. Yu Jinhuang looks back on Taiwan's efforts to stop the virus from entering the country.
This was the first batch of travelers who had to undergo mandatory quarantine in Taiwan. They were picked up from Wuhan, China, by a special government flight when the COVID-19 pandemic first broke out in early 2020. Shortly after that, Taiwan shut its borders completely to all, but returning nationals and residents, who could only enter if they complied with strict rules.
那当然这几天国际的这疫情仍持续的升温那境外在台湾来讲，境外这一入的个案可以就是也是一样是暴增了那为因应这样的一个紧急的情况所以我们也宣布非本国籍人一律限制入境。那至于是不管是本国人或非本国人，只要是入境那都一律要居家检疫14天。
As soon as this announcement was made, the government launched a system to monitor people in quarantine using their phones. 2 months later, returning residents with vulnerable family members were required to quarantine at a hotel instead of at home. By 2021, all incoming travelers also had to provide negative test results 3 days before boarding their flight to Taiwan. The 14-day quarantine was only cut short at the end of 2021, when the government launched a special plan for the Lunar New Year holiday. The quarantine time was decreased further this May and June before it was lifted completely in mid-October. Taiwan attributes its early success in pandemic prevention to its strict border control policies. But the longer restrictions were in place, the more challenges they created. Aside from a labor shortage due to a lack of migrant workers, airline pilots went on strike in May this year because the policies barely allowed them any time with their families.
And for the last 2 years, we are allowed it to quarantine at quarantine hotel, but during the quarantine, if you do a rapid test, then you are allowed it to perform another flight duty again. So if you are allowed it to do the flight duty, it means you are safe, you are healthy. Then it means you are healthy enough to do the duties. Why not healthy enough back to my home?
The travel industry was among the hardest hit by the restrictions. And in March 2021, the government tried to help by creating a travel bubble with the country deemed to be at very low risk for infection, Palau. But there were still limitations on those wanting to make the trip, so the outcome of the travel bubble wasn't as good as the government had hoped. The strict quarantine policies did shift a few times with the availability of home testing kits and once vaccines were ready.
So the home test instead of quarantine, I think, is a really good new direction. Even though when they were starting to push for home test because of the new case spikes last couple months, then it was the mask, the vaccine, and the home test.
Taiwan is already behind most countries in reopening its borders, and confirmed cases here are now primarily local transmissions. Late or not, east border restrictions are now seen as a must if the country wants to stay competitive in the world. Klein Wang and Eugene Huang for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's defense minister says the country's military will not buy any more Tesla vehicles. This comes after Tesla CEO Elon Musk suggested in an interview that Taiwan should become a special administrative zone of China. Beijing claims Taiwan as part of its territory, despite the fact that the Chinese Communist Party has never ruled the island. Taiwan's military currently owns 7 Tesla vehicles.
国防部还要继续采购 Tesla 吗？
如果对我们造成不便的、造成顾虑的，我们把它给限制掉了。目前绝对不会去再买。
The age at which Taiwanese people buy their first home is going up. As John Ventrius reports, high prices and inflation mean the dream of home ownership is increasingly out of reach for the island's young people.
Buying a first home in Taiwan is the hardest it's been in years. A decade ago, the average age of people looking to buy a home like this one was 30 to 35. Now it's between 35 and 40.
我真的蛮吃力的，除非靠我爸妈，存钱就没有很容易啊。
It isn't just a matter of high prices. Inflation means that real wages shrank slightly between January and August, even though the average wage appeared to grow 3% over that time.
台湾的薪资并没有很跟着一个物价水准这样上涨，所以说现在年轻人是买不起房子的。
And there are some young people putting off buying a first home in the hopes the housing market will slump.
如果有个案型的一些财务压力的屋主或者是建商，有可能会稍微便宜卖，但它都不会是一个整体区域的下修状况。
Property market analysts say there's a chance prices will lower outside the big downtown areas if interest rates go up next year. But they say high costs for building materials and a lack of construction labor mean prices will stay high at least to the end of the year. Klein Wang and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
The United States has released its latest national security strategy report. The outline labeled China as, I quote, the most consequential geopolitical challenge that the U.S. is facing. The paper also says that Beijing is currently in the middle of a strategic competition to shape the future of the international order. The congressionally mandated document outlines the United States' international interests and policies and was last released in 2017. Taiwanese chip giant TSMC posted another record for quarterly earnings on Thursday, with net profit climbing nearly 80% on the same period last year. It is the company's strongest quarterly net profit growth in 2 years. TSMC also reported net profit of nearly $9 billion for July to September. The company produces some of the world's most advanced semiconductors, used in everything from mobile phones to fighter jets. If Taiwan is safe, chip supply chains will be secure. That's the message Taiwan's economy minister has delivered on a visit to the United States. Wang Meihua's comments come as China steps up pressure on Taiwan, which makes the vast majority of the world's most advanced computer chips. Rick Lauert has more details.
Taiwan's economic minister, Wang Meihua, is on a visit to the United States, meeting with customers of Taiwan's crucial semiconductor industry. Wang is wielding what's become known as the country's silicon shield. Taiwan is a world leader in semiconductor production, which is vital to the global tech industry and a reason for the international community to take the island's security seriously.
So if Taiwan is safe, the global supply chain will also be secure.
China claims Taiwan as its own and has recently upped threats to take it by force. This has thrust the fate of chip-making giants like Taiwan's Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC, into the spotlight. At a think tank forum in Washington, D.C., Minister Wang said an attack on Taiwan would backfire on Beijing.
So today, the majority of the world's most advanced semiconductor manufacturing take place in Taiwan. Any disruption to this in Taiwan could severely impact the high-tech sector and economies around the world. This highlights Taiwan's interconnectedness with the global economy. This demonstrates why Taiwan is so important. By interfering or disrupting Taiwan, China itself will also be greatly impacted.
These chips are so important that, according to Bloomberg, the US has even included the evacuation of chip factories in its plans for any potential conflict across the Taiwan Strait. Taiwan's national security chief says that if China should invade, it would not be able to take over semiconductor production. The factories are too integrated in the global supply chain, and other countries may not want to work with China.
对岸如果即使占有这个台积电，这个金鸡母也生不出金鸡蛋的。
As an attack from China becomes a more real possibility, Taiwan is spelling out just how such a scenario would upend not only regional stability, but also the global economy. Patrick Chen and Rick Lauert for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's largest innovative technology exhibition opened in Taipei on Thursday. Hundreds of new inventions are on display at InnoTech, with a big focus this year on drones and how they can be used in other ways besides defense. Other highlights of the three-day event include medical technology, like a prosthetic hand linked to smart glasses, and advances in renewable energy. Coming up, a lesson on why you should never give up on your dreams. We meet Taiwan's 82-year-old record-breaking sailor. Details after the break.
This is 我们台湾人要送给台湾的礼物。
我们都清楚，我们都在一起，在完成一件事情。
这是我们的根。
我
For more stories from around the world and from right here in Changhua County, Taiwan, visit www.taiwanplus.com. Right? He says moo.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Ethan Liu. In the latest edition of the World University Rankings released by Times Higher Education, Taiwan's top university, National Taiwan University, was ranked at 187, and that's a drop of 74 places. Despite the poor showing, a record 43 Taiwanese universities made the list. Bing Wang has more details.
This is the most prestigious higher education institution in the country, National Taiwan University, or NTU. It tops many Taiwanese students' list of dream schools, but NTU slid significantly in the 2023 Times Higher Education Rankings, the largest and most diverse evaluation of world universities. NTU was listed as 187th this year, out of almost 2,000. That's a drop of 74 places from its previous standing. It's the second straight year the university ranking has fallen since it peaked at 97th place in 2021. Some students fear this could affect their employment prospects.
在国内的话是还好，可是未来如果有要跟国外有一些可能申请国外的一些事情的话，可能会有一些影响吧。
The Times Higher Education Survey bases the ranking on 5 criteria: teaching, research, citations, industry income, and international outlook. Out of the 5, NTU's teaching, research, and citation scores saw a decrease in standards. This means a drop in the school's quality of education, facilities, research, and academic reach. NTU officials acknowledge improvements are needed if the university wants to be competitive internationally. TaiwanPlus reached out to NTU for comment but did not receive a response by airtime. While NTU plummeted in the rankings, a record 43 Taiwanese universities made this year's list.
我们以前不是全球100大吗？现在没了。对啊，可能就是代表其他就是台金交城其他的学校就是变得进步啊，就不一定要是台湾的首府，一定要是最强。
As competition increases, universities may likely spur each other on to improve the quality of their education. Ricky and Bing Wang for TaiwanPlus.
North Korea says its leader Kim Jong-un oversaw the launch of 2 long-range cruise missiles on Wednesday to confirm their nuclear capability. The country's state media said that the North's recent series of weapon tests shows that its nuclear combat forces are operational and ready. The test simulated the use of smaller tactical nuclear warheads to hit U.S. and South Korean targets. So far this year, North Korea has fired a record number of missiles with over 40 launched. Top defense officials from the U.S. and Germany say they need to help Ukraine build a comprehensive air and missile defense system. In the defense summit of NATO military officials in Brussels, U.S. General Mark Milley suggested combining different systems operated by the allies to help Ukraine defend itself. Leaders in Ukraine have been pushing to acquire an air defense system from Western countries after a series of Russian missile attacks targeted civilian infrastructure across the country. The U.S. Secretary of Defense said that Washington would continue to help Ukraine.
Our resolve to support Ukraine's defenders extends through all seasons. So this contact group stands united and determined. We will continue to boost Ukraine's defensive capabilities for today's urgent needs and for the long haul.
A new documentary is showcasing a classic of Taiwanese opera and the work that's been done to revise it and pass it down over the past few decades. The creator of the play's newest version, a retired opera master, has made a rare appearance at the film's premiere. John Van Trist has more.
2 generations of master performers walking arm in arm. It's unusual to see retired Taiwanese opera star Liao Qiongzhi in public these days. But supported by one of her students, the 87-year-old has come to the premiere of a film focused on a big part of her life's work, reworking and passing on a classic. The Tale of the Lychee Mirror is an anonymous Chinese play that dates back at least to the 16th century. The love story has been adapted to Taiwan's traditional opera stages, most recently by Liao herself, who revised the script and created her own portrayal of the female lead. Liao began teaching her version of the play to students in the 1980s, and this documentary explores what these students have gone on to do with her creation. Both the film's director and critics have praised for Liao's adaptation.
老师一下就可以取到一个很重要的，就是这个是一出青春浪漫的爱情戏。所以说，我们是要让年轻人看，我们不是要让他只是看一个比较静态的一个古迹。他如何在每一次的演出之后，不断的精益求精的改变，就即使到现在他年纪这么大了，他其实也从来没有放下。
Liao herself says her work refining and teaching this play has all been for the future of her art form.
甲因教的东西，我嘛有甲因交代讲吼，恁唔是干那学搬戏尔，唔是学表演尔，恁共款爱学传授的，会晓传授吼，才摊会开。
The team behind the film says it's also been working to pass on the art of Taiwanese opera in its own way, by documenting the work to refine and perfect one of its classic plays. Asnaya Zhou and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
An octogenarian has set a record as the oldest person to sail around Taiwan.
以前我是有一个要追梦，但是我现在这个年龄了，是要在圆梦。但是我今天很高兴告诉大家，我完成了我圆梦的。
82-year-old Zhan Zhenfeng has been dreaming of this day for 40 years. He set off in the dinghy from Xizibei in southern Taiwan's Kaohsiung on August 13th and finished his trip on Wednesday after around 2 months. The journey took longer than expected due to bad weather and military drills. Reporter Sandy Chi joined Zhan while he was sailing around northern Taiwan. Stay tuned to TaiwanPlus for our exclusive report. Sometimes it takes an outside perspective to see something new. One British national who has lived in Taiwan for a decade makes painstakingly detailed hand-drawn maps of local cities and areas, some with a six-legged twist. Here is his story.
我来台湾差不多10年了。Within these 10 years, I've drawn Taipei, Dadaochen, Taichung, Hsinchu, Jiayi. Currently, I'm drawing Hamasing, which is part of Kaohsiung. There's also been a few smaller maps like Lesheng and Chanchushan. When I start a drawing, it's usually somewhere that I want to explore. So I begin to look at pictures, look at any interesting landmarks in that area. I start to walk around it, explore a bit. Eventually, I start to piece together a drawing in my mind. To the point I can't not draw it, it becomes almost like an obsession. Then I begin. 这个区域有好多的日本时代的建筑，总统府、行政院、司法院，他们都有日式的 ，like see that。在第2次世界大战，总统府被破坏了。我觉得很少人知道，因为这个的历史不在台湾的课本。Originally, I was in quite a small room. I had a very small desk as well. I couldn't fit large pieces of paper on it. So I took lots of small pieces of paper and I'd stick them together to make the larger drawings. And I always really enjoyed that because you could kind of see the city growing in front of you. About 7 years ago, I told my family that I was ready to move back to England and ready to settle. But a couple of months after I told them that, I put the Taipei drawing up on Facebook just to see what happened. And I was very surprised because suddenly it was shared everywhere and a lot of people were commenting, a lot of people liked it. Some people invited me to exhibit it. I had to tell my parents, like, something's taken off here. I think I want to see where this goes. So I decided to stay in Taiwan and I was very happy that I did so. I'm naturally quite like a curious person. Walking around, I'd often be like, what is this place? What history is here? And so I'd learn a lot about Taiwan through that, and I generally feel like I knew the country a little bit better. When I'm not in the city, usually I like to go out to the mountains around Taipei. The insects were chosen especially because they're often like the most overlooked creatures of the forest. Most people pay more attention to the deer and the bears and this kind of thing, but I wanted something that is a little less visible. Taiwan has a quite vivid amount of insects and a lot of things that I've never seen before. You only find it in Taiwan. Stuff like the praying mantises, the locusts, the hornets, and especially sort of the giant spiders, which I'm both terrified of but also kind of fascinated by. The idea behind the insects was an expression of what I saw as the cities expanding continuously and in quite an unregulated way across not only Taiwan but a lot of countries. It was quite shocking how much of the forests and how much of the countryside has been lost in even just 10 years. That's why the cities are sort of drawn across the insects, like taking over them. 其实台湾有很多很棒的大自然，我希望也透过我的创作来让更多人注意到环境保护的重要。
Thank you for watching today's TaiwanPlus News. Finally, we leave you with images of Roosevelt elks at Northwest Trek Wildlife Park. I'm Ethan Liu. Take care, and I'll see you next time.